Welcome back to Rarest Photos. It's New Year's Eve, just one day until New Year's. So, I've never been a big party on New Year's kind of guy. I normally would stay up, till with my kids for sure, the ones that wanted to stay up and celebrate the New Year's and count it down and stuff like that. So if you do go out there and celebrate, be safe, okay? If you happen to be drinking, obviously get an Uber or have somebody pick you up. I will be staying in myself. My wife and I go to bed fairly early, actually, which is interesting. And of course, we're going to be reading some From Here to the Great Unknown. But even when I was like playing in clubs when I was younger, I didn't like singing at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning. I didn't like people that were out of control, so sloshed that they would. I mean, heck, I had some crazy stuff happen. I had people slamming people on tables, diving off of bars. My bass player did that. Pretty wild. So anyways, have a great New Year's Eve. If you're celebrating it be grateful for the year that just passed. We're not promised anything besides to this very second. We're not even promised today or tomorrow. No matter what religion or philosophy you prescribe to, that's pretty much the truth. It's certainly, be grateful for what we have. And I'm grateful for all of you. Even some of the people that, the lollipop kid naysayers that I joke about. And I'm grateful for y'all. I mean, and the thing is, I don't hold anything personal against y'all. You might not believe in certain things that I read or whatnot, and I'm not too crazy about you being negative on your videos or you being negative on your Facebook posts, but that's your prerogative. If you want to live in the negative all the time, then do it. I hope you don't. I hope that 2025 brings you more peace, more happiness, more acceptance. Bad things happen to all of us in our lifetimes. Okay, we all have had a lot of stuff that's happened, either traumatic that was put upon us, or things that we just had to experience and deal with that we didn't ask for. Death of family members, loss of relationships. So if I can take one piece of advice that's helped me throughout my life, is accept that the past sucked and the past was great. All of it together. But the past is the past. And move forward with your own life, okay? We can look back in the history of Elvis and Priscilla and Anne Margaret and stuff like that, and we can talk about Mike Stone even, and see that negative stuff happened. But if people are moving forward in a positive direction and they're doing positive things, then we can choose to let go whatever anger or annoyance that we have at them. Now, if they're still doing negative things, then we should still talk about it, and hope that they change their ways, and hope that maybe something that we do make perhaps helps them change their ways. Now, we don't have any control over it, obviously, but I know we all like to dive into the histories of everybody. And in 2025, I'm going to be reading a lot, obviously, not on just this channel, but I've got other channels as well. And I have the Elvis and the Legends, so we'll still do some Elvis covers. I'll do some more of the photos over there. And a lot of you have already gone over there and subscribed. So that's great. And if you want to go subscribe over there, great. Like I always say with all my channels, take what you want, leave what you want, okay? So, let me see here. The Italian girl had been a temporary thing, but I was devastated. I got to go back and look what okay, so Danny, she's talking about Danny Keough. She was dating Danny. They lasted about 4 months. And then he got a crush on some Italian girl who didn't speak English and had hairy armpits. That's kind of where we left off. So let's go ahead and do it here. The Italian girl had been a temporary thing, but I was so devastated. You could mop me up off the floor. Now, meanwhile, I would date other uninteresting time passers. One was Brock. So we did read this, but I'll read it anyways. That's the page that I stopped on. One was Brock, the bug squasher. A guy that would literally get off on dropping potato bugs and watching them splatter. Sorry. I don't even know why I read that again. It would actually give. Okay, I'm not going to read that. That was gross. It says, I didn't know what I wanted except that I wanted to be with Danny, and I knew that I needed to have children with Danny too, which is the weirdest, craziest part of it. I felt like I was supposed to have children with him. I somehow knew that we would always be connected, that it would always be okay, and that it would never be a bad situation for a child. She was right. Danny's been a great father. Um, to Riley, and of course to Ben. Gosh, what a sad thing. I still cannot believe that Ben is gone. I mean, we didn't even really get a chance to know him much, and he passed away. I mean, I don't even remember there being much pressure about the whole thing about him being Elvis's grandson. I do remember the photo that got put out. I think Priscilla said he looks just like his grandfather. That kind of pressure. I guess sometimes you think that's going to lift a child up, you know. I'm going to go golf today, by the way, so I'm dressed for the coolness of the outside before I go. I wanted to get some reading in, and then I'll do some reading when I get back. And golfing takes a long time, about 5 hours for 18 holes. Sometimes I'm good, and sometimes I suck. That's the game of golf, right? All right, so Danny moved away from LA for a while, and whenever he came back, my antennas would be trained on him. I'd see him at parties, and it would utterly, literally destroy me, especially if he showed up with some other girl. I couldn't tell that he was even thinking about me or what he was thinking about me. It was a cat and mouse game for a while. I'd show up at a party with a guy knowing Danny would be there, and I was at a 1,000% being conniving and manipulative and calculating. I would watch Danny see me with a guy, and his whole disposition would change. He'd be visibly bummed, his energy would drop, but I would still think that he didn't give a hoot at all about me. When we're reading this, okay, there are people that want to criticize Lisa. But remember, this is the girl that lived with a narcissistic mother and an abusive stepfather figure in Michael Edwards. A mother that allowed it to happen for years after her daughter telling her. So, Lisa's going to be screwed up. And not just that, you know, her father passed away. Not just any father, but a hero to millions. You can't grieve in quiet privateness. Everything is on display. I had to leave that silent for a second because it's a heavy, heavy thing I just said. A 9-year-old girl with the weight of the Elvis world crushing her. Not really protected by Priscilla. Priscilla was acting like she was protecting Lisa, but Priscilla was trying to protect herself. Everything we've seen about Priscilla, that we've seen in the books and we've heard about history, shows that she was really all about herself, about her career. So when we read something like that, where Lisa's saying, I was 1,000% being conniving and manipulative and calculating. Well, she got it honest from her mother. But she also, that's the way she survived, right? She chased him for 2 years, is what Riley says. There was no shame in her, but he was just afraid of her fame and was running from the phenomenon of her. He knew that she would be his destruction, and he was not afraid of much when he was younger, but she scared the living dog poop out of her. He felt like a minnow in an ocean of sharks, and he was just a bass player. This was way too big for him. So yeah, I mean, gosh. Danny Keough, just a little guy, just a little bass player. It was a tall task for anybody to be with Lisa. Think about it. Put yourselves in her shoes. And maybe you've been there. Maybe a few of you have been there. Being with somebody that's super famous. It's almost too much to ask anybody, right? I showed up at his place one day and we sat on the curb outside and talked. I said, this is really eating me up. So let's just talk about how we actually feel and no more games. Well, we were honest with each other, and then a couple of weeks later, we went on a date to the MTV Video Music Awards. Danny almost got arrested at that night. At one point, a paparazzo it turned out, came charging at us in the dark, and Danny reflexively hit him, and the guy fell over one of those sawhorse barriers. We had to give People magazine a photo so the photographer wouldn't press charges. They paid $70,000 for it. Welcome into my dating life, Danny Keough, right? It's what she said. We go on a date after years or months or whatever it is of avoiding each other. And that's what he has to deal with the very first night. We didn't think being famous was cool. We didn't really hang out with other celebrities. Lisa said we were low-key and unextravagant. I had to downplay things for Danny because he was so proud, and I didn't want to scare him off. He would work odd jobs, painting, roofing, doing construction, and play whatever gigs he got. Now that's a great piece of information about Danny, about Riley's father, which maybe explains part of maybe why Riley turned out so well too. You know, here he was. Lisa had enough money. You know, she wasn't I don't think she'd gotten her money yet from Graceland, from the estate. But he could have mooched off of her. He didn't know. He's painting, and I'll tell you what, I've been a painter. Cutting in ceilings, cutting in baseboards while you're on your knees, you know, rolling the walls, waiting for it to dry, touching up the places that need to be touched up, cutting in more stuff. Doesn't seem very hard, but after 8 or 10 hours of it, of the stretching, the flexing, the reaching, being on your knees, your back, even for a young guy, it'll wear you out. And if you're doing it 5 days a week, my brother Steven used to drop me off at a house because he had a pretty big business in California. And of course, I was singing, and I preferred to work. You know, I mean, I worked with some of the crews that he had. They were all Hispanic, and I didn't know how to speak Spanish, but we joke around. And he'd usually leave me in charge, which, you know, as soon as my brother Steven left, they'd all yell, "Siesta!" joking around to see whether they'd get away with it. I'm like, nah, we got to work, guys. So as long as I worked, they worked. You know, hardest working, hardest playing individuals I've ever met is the Hispanic community. Great people, great with family. You know, so, but they like to work hard, they like to play hard. And I think that's a great thing for us to maybe recognize out there in the world. I know there's all this conversations about illegal immigration, and all that stuff. I mean, it's been all over politics for the last decade and a half. But you know, our neighbors to the south, Mexico, are great people. They really are, and they work hard. I think the immigration problems that we have stem from people coming from other countries that are criminals, you know, or people that are, escaping their past. And not all of them are bad, but regardless, I just wanted to go back and say, hey, you know, even here in Tennessee, my wife and I did Radio Mahara, the biggest station in Mexico. We did a party for them. Oh, it's great. They partied well into the night, dancing, singing. Good people. So when I say my brother would drop me off to do these painting jobs, he dropped me off about 8 o'clock at night sometimes when I needed to make extra money and he needed the job done quicker. And I'd work from 8 o'clock until the morning time when he came back, and then work all day again. Now, of course, in the middle of the night around 2 o'clock to about 4, I'd take a nap, sleep for a couple hours. But it's hard work. What Danny was doing was hard work. Roofing, construction, painting, and playing whatever gigs he got. Lisa said I didn't live like a princess either. My first car was a used Toyota Celica Supra. Now, though there was one night in the China Club when I was sitting with my friends in a booth, and Rick James landed right next to me. Rick and I had run into each other a couple times before, and he seemed so broken. He'd say, I'm not doing good, or I'm trying to quit, and I'm trying to get my life together. See, I had a soft spot for him, and I wanted to fix him. That night, Rick was really out of it, let's just say. She used some cuss words and some other stuff that YouTube doesn't want me to say. And Danny saw him getting physically too close to me and shook his head at Rick. Something went boof, and Rick got up and jumped through the air like a wild animal to attack Danny. Luckily, the bouncer saw it and literally grabbed Rick in midair and threw him out of the club. Now, I don't know whether this is Rick James, the original Super Freak. I gotta look that up. You know that song? Let's see here. Rick James and Lisa. I wonder if this is the same guy. Doing a little history searching. Lisa Marie Presley. Y'all might be searching it before. It doesn't really say. The immortal Rick James. Okay. So yeah, I think it is Rick James. The immortal Rick James, the original Super Freak. So the bouncer literally grabbed Rick in midair and threw him out of the club. Around that time, I got myself a job as Jerry Schilling's assistant. But by then, Jerry was on the board of Elvis Presley Enterprises. I didn't know that. I mean, you would think, and I know that that Priscilla and Jerry were close. I didn't know. I didn't know that Jerry was on the board of Elvis Presley Enterprises. So, Jerry and my mom would have me go to meetings. I didn't know what the heck I was supposed to be doing, so I just sit and listen. My mom was at the helm and wanted me to get trained up for when I took over after I turned 25. One day I made the mistake of sitting at the head of the table at a board meeting. My mom came in and said, "Don't you ever sit in my seat at the head of the table. Who do you think you are? This is my business. I'm the one who opened Graceland. You can't just come in here and sit there like you're something." Now I guess I got to ask all of y'all mothers. Is that something that you say to your daughter who sat there at the seat and a table? Seems to be a little too much. Seems to be pretty high and mighty. Seems to be that she thinks an awful lot about herself. I'm not shocked. I mean, if anything, the exception would be to hear kind, loving things about Priscilla. That would be the exception for me. Doesn't mean that she's not capable of it, or maybe we all have it wrong. Could it be? All right. But funny stuff happened in that short time working for Jerry Schilling too. He was managing Jerry Lee Lewis then, and Jerry was the worst possible person to try to manage. But Lewis loved me, and he was always great with me. One day I was flying back to Memphis to LA, and I happened to sit next to Jerry Lee. Now when we landed, the office got a message to me in the plane that says, "Don't get off, don't get his luggage. The feds are waiting for him at the gate." Apparently Jerry Lee had a briefcase. I presume it was filled with illegal substances. I'm not going to say the name of the drug, but it's DEMEROL. Probably. So instead of getting the bag, Jerry Lee and I bucked it out of the airport, the two of us running like fugitives. But I'm not really a phone person. In fact, the worst thing you can do is make me answer. That's probably the least well-written thing in the book. I just jumped from that to, but I'm not really a phone person. Did I miss something? Maybe I should have just said I'm not really a phone person. Yeah. In fact, the worst thing you can do is make me answer the GD phone. And I used to have to answer the phone for Jerry Schilling. He fired me after about 6 months. Danny and I stayed together for a year that time. A whole year. See, I was 19. I even pretended to like his hero, bass player Jaco Pastorius. My old bass player played with me for a little while when I was young. My very first band. He also played in our marching band and concert band. Travis Armstrong, his hero, was Jaco Pastorius. I remember that. That's the only other times I've ever heard it is him and in this book. Jaco Pastorius. For him, though, I wasn't a jazz fan. And in that year that Danny and I were together, I got pregnant. But it wasn't the first time I got pregnant by him. The first time I got pregnant, I didn't even know it. During the first 4 months we dated, I had ended up in the ER with horrible pains, and they had rushed me into surgery. The doctors thought it was my appendix, but when it came around, they told me I had an ectopic pregnancy. While they were in there, they took my appendix out too. Shoot. Whoops. Doctors. You know, it's called the practice of medicine, right? I mean, I don't want to make people scared of doctors. And there are good doctors out there, but geez. You know, the experiences that I've had where I was right, doctors were wrong. Head of pediatrics was wrong, I was right. You know, and then, of course, my wife almost losing her life twice. Mistakes that they made, lies that they told. Best thing you can do is stay healthy, right? If we can stay healthy and avoid having to go to the hospital, that's great. But here's the deal. Usually when you got to go to the hospital, I'm not saying this case with Lisa, this poor Lisa had ectopic pregnancy, so it's not like they would have known. I don't think. Maybe I guess they would have. But still, I don't know whether they took her appendix out by accident or just as a precaution. Let's just go ahead and take out anything that could hurt. I had never gotten pregnant with any other reason, which is fascinating because I'd been equally, with any other person, which is fascinating because I'd been equally as sloppy. Not using birth control or whatever. But with Danny, it happened that first time, and then it happened again when we were back together. That second time, I didn't know what to do, and neither did Danny. She ended up having and it was the stupidest thing I've ever done in my whole life. You know how many times I've heard that from people? I dated a girl a long time ago. A couple of years before her and I dated. She talked about how she was kind of pushed into it. She was young. She was scared. And her boyfriend had taken her there. And she would still cry whenever she talked about it. You know, I get that it's everybody's choice to do what they want to do. To drink, to smoke, to do illegal substances, to hurt each other, to fight, to cheat. We all have the choices to do it. And then that choice, which has been in the Supreme Court and back to the states and politics. You know, I don't even really want to take a stance one way or the other. I mean, I've got the way I know the way I feel. My wife knows the way I feel. But if it is going to be something that's on the books or a law that can be done, you know, regardless of health, if it's a choice thing, I don't think people understand that habit. You know, anyway, I'm not going to, you know, the emotional implications that can happen later on because of it. Especially when you're young doing something like that because you're scared. That's as far as I'm going to go. But she says it was the stupidest thing I've ever done in my whole life. I was devastated. I did it, and we both cried. We were both destroyed, and not long after, we fell apart and broke up. I couldn't live with it myself. Well, there paints a pretty decent picture of what it can be. You know, like I said, I'm not going to turn this into a political discussion or a judgmental discussion about all that stuff. I mean, I've always said live and let live. People are going to do what they want to do. I myself will choose a different path. My wife will choose a different path. You know, there are some people that get tattoos. Some people that get piercings all over their body. That's for them. I don't have a judgment on that. I've had earrings before. I had a couple of earrings here when I was younger. And tattoos, I've just never felt the need to get one. Doesn't mean that I judge people for having them. Some people have them all over their body. Um, it's their life, their body, and once again, I'm not in control of laws, and I'm not in control of morality, even if it is a piece of morality, perhaps. I think it is in the Bible, but it doesn't mean that that was exactly a spiritual thing to have written down. I mean, that's another discussion. Y'all know that I actually really considered being a pastor. And before that, I considered being a Catholic priest, until I read that you had to be celibate and you couldn't have a family. And no, I think everybody knows what they can, what they can't do. And so, no father sins. And then later on in life, I was thinking about going to a seminary school. And my dad was like, well, he was like, well, you're not Catholic. What are you? I'm like, well, I don't really know what I am. I've been to Nazarene churches. I went to Pentecostals. I went to Lutherans. I even went to Seventh-day Adventist to check it out. I went to Church of Christ. I mean, I all of the churches. And what I saw, my opinion, what I saw with every church was something fundamentally wrong with every one of them. And it makes kind of sense, because every church says you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, you can't do that. For the Church of Christ, I believe it's not playing instruments or not dancing close to one another or something like that. Pentecostals, boy, I went to one and I couldn't stop giggling and laughing. That doesn't mean that they're not good people in there, and that there's not. I think every church has goodness to it, in my opinion, and that includes the people that go. But what I can say from my experience is that, in my opinion, God doesn't need you to go to a church. Wherever two or more are gathered, I'm in their midst. It could be you and a wife. It could be you and, a friend. And that's an interesting thing too, because it says when you pray, don't pray outwardly, openly to get attention. Go to a closet and pray, stuff like that. I would think that God would be in your midst if you're praying by yourself. So I've got a lot of fundamental issues with a lot of that stuff, but what I do know, on my side, is that God loves us. If God is like a parent, I know how I love my children. Okay? I don't want to see them get hurt. I'm always saying, hey, watch out when you cross the road. Take your phone with you. I've tried to give my 9-year-old more freedom than I had as a child. My dad was a mother hen over me. Probably because he lost when my mom died when I was young, and my brother died. Two brothers, and my other brother almost died at that point in time. So I was young, but my belief. Well, okay. Well, to go back to the story, my dad was like, "What church are you going to be? You don't believe in the Catholic Church. You don't believe in this and that and this and that." And he goes, "What are you going to call it? The Church of Sins?" I had to laugh. I was like, "It's actually a pretty good marketing technique there, Dad. Church of Sins. We all fall short. You all are welcome," sort of a thing. But I mean, I have a great love of God, and I've had a great spiritual life where God has blessed me. God has taught me a lot of lessons for me not following the right things and right advice. I've tested God, and He's actually come through and given me the answers. But each time I've tested Him and asked Him, I haven't done it in a long time because I don't need to anymore. But I know everybody has their own spiritual path. Lisa, she was devastated. And I don't know how much Lisa ever grew into whatever faith it was. I hope she had something private, something quiet, something we don't know about, or maybe there's something in the book here. I don't know. She was in Scientology, and I think that it gave her an escape from Priscilla. I don't know if it necessarily gave her an escape from... I don't know. I'm almost done reading. I'm going to read a little bit more. And then I've got to hop in the truck, and I got to get out to the golf course and putt 10 or 15 putts, 20 putts, and take a couple swings in this creaky body. And see if I can't string some pars together and maybe get a birdie. and try to avoid any double bogeys. Bogeys are going to happen. I'm not a professional, you know. Unless you're out there practicing 3-4 hours a day, you're not going to be. So all you golfers, you know what I'm talking about. All right, so Danny went off to join the band on a cruise ship that traveled through the Caribbean. I went and traveled through Europe on a Eurail pass for a couple months. All the while, I could not believe that I had a ABORTION. What she did. I was so upset with myself. So I made a plan. I planned and I plotted and I schemed. I pinpointed exactly when I was ovulating. I even went to Memphis first to hang out with my Aunt Patsy to work out how to make it happen. It was a group effort. I had it down to a science. Then purposely planned a trip to see Danny on the ship. We went to the island of Aruba or somewhere for the night. I remember getting back to the ship hoping I'd done it. There's a cuss word. Danny had no idea of my plan, but I didn't really care anymore what he thought about it. I didn't care if he wanted to be part of it or not. See, she was lost. She was lost. And then doing what she did made her lost more. I mean, gosh. I mean, when you don't have... Let me say this real quick about religion. They use fear. All churches and religions use fear. And when you look at it from 10,000 feet, you might see that it looks like a bad thing. Oh, you're going to burn and you're going to suffer the eternal hell, you know. All the stuff that gets said in the Christianity religion, and I'm sure the other religions have the other things too. But there's one good thing about fear, is that sometimes it keeps you from doing things that hurt yourself. And I wish that maybe it was preached or taught more in that form. Because sins are just mistakes. And they're all supposed to be all equal except for blasphemy. So if all sins are equal, gossiping, gluttony, greed, all that other stuff, if they're all equal, if everything's equal, cheating on a spouse, I mean, all that stuff, stealing something from the store, if it's all equal, and then you just go down to a little lower level and go, okay, it's all equal, sins are mistakes, you know, why are they in the 10 Commandments, all this other stuff, these commandments and things that we're not supposed to do? Shouldn't that be what people, churches, pastors, priests, preach in a more loving thing? Look, okay, you're not going to go to hell because of this. You know, God's trying to protect you. He's trying to protect you from yourself, because we all have this in us, inside of ourselves. The need to do this, the need to whatever. I'm not going to get involved in all the sins and all the things that churches judge. She didn't have any of that. She was with Scientology. She didn't have any of it. So she's just bouncing all over the place. And I saw somebody judging about how she's manipulating now. She trapped Danny. You're a young person, you know. I mean, she's instinctually thinking, okay, I'm gonna cover this up. I'm gonna fix it. I'm gonna correct it. I did this. This split us up. If it happens again and I've got a baby inside of me, we're gonna be back together. He's gonna be healed. I'm gonna be healed. We're gonna be healed. It's gonna be okay, and we'll forget about what happened. I really wish Riley would have written that, and maybe she does. I hope she writes it. I hope she understands that. I still can believe that I had the abortion. I thought, I'm going to have this child. There's a child that I need to be having. And I would be talking to the lost child saying, I'm so sorry. I can't believe I effing did that. Please forgive me and stay with me until I get pregnant again. Then I left Aruba, waited 2 weeks, did the pregnancy test, and called Danny up. I'm pregnant, I said. Danny knew he had to marry me. I trapped him. I didn't really mean to, but I did. That's the section that, and forgive me for calling you lollipop kids and naysayers, but that's the section of people that want to judge Lisa about it, or the Priscilla fans, okay? And once again, and I say that, and maybe I should stop saying that. I don't know. I probably should stop saying that. I mean, but I don't want to lump them into the doubters, the believers and the doubters. Let me just say the negative ninnies. How's that? The negative ninnies. They don't like anybody. They don't like Priscilla. They don't like Lisa. You know, a lot of them don't like Elvis. Riley said, my mom subsequently told me every detail of timing her ovulation for that moment in Aruba, and she absolutely meant to trap my dad. The day my dad found out that he was going to be a father, he had been rehearsing in the disco room. The ship was swaying back and forth, and he was holding the drummer's cymbal to save it from crashing down. Off to the right of the disco room, there was a green room, and some people called from there. There's a phone call for you, Danny. This was long before cell phones, and calling a ship was super rare. You had to call the relay point to connect to the boat via wideband radio, or something like that anyways. When my dad got to the phone, he remembered what the phone looked like. It was white. My mom said, I'm pregnant. And my dad dropped the handset. He was in shock because he never planned to be married or have kids. But something made him go, let's do it. So he quickly recovered, picked up the phone, and simply said, okay. Huh. Gosh. What would the world be like? What would this future be like? If Lisa hadn't made a mistake, perhaps, and did something that crushed her and broke them up, and then, in a sense, made another mistake and trapped Danny to try to cover up the grief of it all, to make things right. Out of that, we have Ben and Riley. And out of that reality, Ben takes his life down the road. Lisa passes away young. And I'm not saying none of this stuff would have still happened. And I'm not even saying literally that. And of course we have Riley, who she probably don't like the fact that I make videos about Priscilla, if she even's aware of it. I mean, she's so high up there with responsibilities, and she's got her own life and acting and directing. But if she did, I don't think she would really like it. Maybe she would. Maybe she'd be fine with it. I don't know how pragmatic she is with things. Whether she goes, oh yeah, that's probably true. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Regardless, I don't know. But I'm glad that we have Riley. I love her shows. My wife and I love Riley Keough's shows. You know, and of course she's now in charge of kind of keeping the spirit of Elvis alive in the estate in Graceland. And I believe her little sisters, Harper and Finley, I think that they really, really love Elvis. At least one of them does. None of those people would come to be. They would not be around if it wasn't for the mistakes. So I say that to close this out by saying, look, we've done things in our lives that we're not proud of. We've made mistakes. We've hurt people. Sometimes a lot of goodness comes out of it. Sometimes a lot of pain and lessons come out of it. For Lisa, I don't think she had any choice. She was raised by her mom. She was abused by Michael Edwards, allegedly, in his book and her book. The level of abuse we can argue about. I mean, we don't know. We weren't there. But certainly they both stated in their books that there was abuse, you know. She had no, she was just reactionary about everything in her life. She hadn't been allowed to grieve at all. Really, she hadn't, not properly. And maybe she grieves more towards the end of this book. But some people go through life so distracted, so hurt, that they don't grieve what happened to them. There's people that have YouTube channels that go off judging everybody all the time, nonstop, accusing them of being the same way she is and he is, you know? And that's how they are. Because they they can't grieve. They haven't been able to. They haven't found a therapist, or they haven't found a way to be honest with how badly they're hurt, or maybe I don't really want to get involved in all that stuff, but I don't know. I don't know where Lisa was at with that. She seems like she was in constant pain in her life, which makes it even sadder reading this book. And that's part of the reason I haven't read as much. I mean, it's a very deep dive into the sadness of Elvis dying, her dad, and then of course Lisa, and then Ben dying. You know. Anyhow, I hope y'all have enjoyed this, and this is a good book. It really is. I mean, if you're in the UK, you've got some of the stuff edited out that is not in the book, not in the US book, and not on the online book. So, TCB TLC. Till next time, this is Rare Photos. I'll try to do another couple videos. And I look forward to spending 2025 with y'all. And thank you so much for choosing to spend 2024 with me, okay? And hey, don't get involved in the negative stuff that's out there on YouTube. Don't worry about defending me. Don't put yourself in the target of anybody, all right? Live and let live. Let it be. Keep emailing me, rarebusphotos@gmail.com, if there's any other books you want me to read. There's a lot of books, and I'm sure I'll tackle some of the other books on some of the other channels too. So you guys can keep track of 2 books on this channel, or 3 books on this channel, and then maybe a couple books on this channel. Okay, that way you can keep them sorted out so there's not too much stuff going on. All right, see you later.